The widow dropped to her knees in the dust. The boy was barely breathing, his bare feet torn raw, his small hands locked around a tin box, like it was the last thing keeping him alive. She pried it open with shaking fingers. Inside was a letter, folded tight, stained with blood. She read the first line, and her whole body went still. Dear Clara, if you're reading this, I'm already dead. If you want to hear what happened next, subscribe to my channel and stay until the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Clara Whitfield hadn't spoken to God in 2 years. Not since Matthew died coughing blood into a rag on the same bed where she'd lost 2 babies. Not since she'd buried him under the cottonwood tree behind the ranch and stood there alone waiting for something, anything to tell her it was going to be all right. Nothing came. So she stopped asking. She ran the ranch herself now. 40 acres of hard Colorado land outside Copper Ridge, a town so small it barely had a name. She mended her own fences, broke her own horses, hauled her own water from the creek when the well ran low. Folks in town called her stubborn. She called it surviving. It was mid-July, the kind of summer heat that baked the ground white and made the air shimmer like something out of a fever dream. Clara was on the porch, mending a bridle when she saw him. A shape on the road. Small, moving slow. She set the bridle down and stood, shielding her eyes. The shape got closer. A boy. 10, maybe 11. Walking barefoot on the hot dirt road, weaving side to side, like he might fall any second. He was carrying something. A tin box pressed tight against his chest with both arms, like someone might try to take it. Clara stepped off the porch. The boy made it to the gate and stopped. His legs buckled. He went down on his knees, then forward face first into the dust. Clara ran. She reached him, turned him over. His lips were cracked. His skin was burning hot. His eyes fluttered open, looked at her without seeing, then closed again. But his hands never let go of that box. She carried him inside, laid him on the kitchen table, and poured water over a cloth. She pressed it to his face, his neck, the raw and blistered soles of his feet. He stirred, moaned. "Easy," she said. "You're safe." His eyes opened again. This time they focused. "You, Clara Whitfield," he whispered. Her hand stopped. "Who's asking?" "My papa. He told me to find you." "Who's your papa?" The boy's fingers tightened around the tin box. "Robert Holden." Clara went still. Robert Holden. She hadn't heard that name since Matthew's funeral. Robert had come, stood in the back hat in his hands, said 3 words to her, he was brave, and left. She'd never seen him again. "Where's your papa now?" Clara asked. The boy didn't answer. He pushed the tin box toward her with trembling hands. "He said give this to you. He said you'd understand." Clara took the box. It was dented, scratched, the kind of thing a man might keep tobacco in, or old letters. She opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper, stained dark in places. Blood. She could smell it. She unfolded it and read. "Dear Clara, if you're reading this, I'm already dead. I don't have the right to ask you for anything. Matthew was the best man I ever knew, and I wasn't there when he needed me. But I'm asking anyway. This boy is my son. His name is Jesse. He's 10 years old. His mother's been gone since he was 3. I've been raising him alone near the Copper Creek mines. I got in trouble with a man named Edgar Flint. He owns the mining company. I found something on my land, something valuable, and Flint wants it. He's been trying to take my claim for 2 years. I signed papers I shouldn't have signed. I was desperate. Clara Flint killed me. I know it as sure as I'm writing this. He'll make it look like an accident, a cave-in, a fire something. And when I'm gone, he'll come for Jesse. Not because he cares about the boy, because whoever has Jesse has rights to my land. Don't let him take my son. You're the only person I trust. Matthew would have done this for me. I'm praying you will too. Robert Holden. Clara read it twice. Her hands were shaking. She looked at the boy on her table, this thin, sunburned child with dirt in his hair and blood on his feet. "How long you been walking?" she asked. 5 days. "From Copper Creek?" "Yes, ma'am." "Alone?" "Yes, ma'am. Papa told me the way before, made me memorize it, said if anything happened, I should walk south and find the ranch with the cottonwood tree out back." Clara's throat went tight. Matthew's tree. "You hungry?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." She set the letter down and moved to the stove. Her hands were still shaking. She didn't let him see. She heated bean-sliced bread, poured him a glass of water, then another. He ate like he hadn't eaten in days because he hadn't. "What happened to your Papa Jesse?" The boy set down his fork. His eyes went somewhere far away. "There was a cave-in at the mine, 3 weeks ago. They said it was an accident. Said the timbers gave out." He paused. "But Papa told me. He told me they were coming. He gave me the box and said if he didn't come home by dark, I should start walking. And he didn't come home." "No, ma'am." "Did you see anyone? After?" Jesse nodded slowly. "Men came to the cabin the next morning. I was hiding in the woods like Papa said. 3 men. They tore the cabin apart, took papers from Papa's desk. Then they burned it." "Burned your cabin?" "Yes, ma'am. I watched it from the trees." Clara's jaw clenched. She turned away from him, pressing her hands flat on the counter. She breathed slow, in and out. In and out. "These men," she said. "Did you recognize any of them?" "One of them. Mr. Greer. He works for Mr. Flint at the mine office. And this Mr. Flint, you know him?" Jesse's face changed. Something hard came into his eyes, something that didn't belong on a 10-year-old's face. "He came to our cabin lots of times, always smiling, always calling me son. Papa hated it. Said Mr. Flint wasn't the kind of man who smiles because he's happy. Said he smiles because he's planning." Clara turned back to face him. "Your Papa was a smart man." "He was the smartest man I ever knew." "I believe that." She sat down across from him. "Jesse, I need you to tell me something, and I need you to think careful before you answer. Did your Papa ever tell you what he found on your land? The thing Flint wants?" Jesse hesitated. His hand went to the tin box still on the table. "Gold," he said quietly. "Papa found a gold vein on our land, up near the North Ridge. He said it was big, real big. He filed a claim in his name legal and proper, but Mr. Flint found out. And Flint wanted it. He said Papa's land was part of the mining company grant, said the claim wasn't valid. Papa said that was a lie. He had the deed. He had the papers. Where are those papers now?" Jesse opened the tin box again. Underneath where the letter had been, there was a second fold of paper thicker, sealed with wax. "Papa said guard these with my life." Clara took the papers carefully. A land deed. A mining claim properly filed with the territorial office, stamped and dated. Robert Holden's name clear as day. She stared at them. "Jesse." "Yes, ma'am. These papers are why Flint burned your cabin. He was looking for them." "I know." "And he didn't find them because your Papa gave them to you." "Yes, ma'am." Clara folded the papers and put them back in the box. She closed the lid. "You'll stay here," she said. "Long as you need." "Thank you, ma'am." "And stop calling me ma'am. My name's Clara." The ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Yes, ma Clara." She almost smiled back. Almost. That night she set him up in the spare room, the one she'd kept empty, the one that was supposed to be for the babies who never came. She put fresh sheets on the bed, brought a pillow set, a glass of water on the nightstand. Jesse sat on the edge of the bed, looking around the room. His eyes stopped on a small wooden horse on the shelf. Matthew had carved it years ago for a child they'd never have. "That's a nice horse," Jesse said. "My husband made it." "Where's your husband?" "Under the cottonwood tree." Jesse looked at her. He understood. He didn't say he was sorry. He just nodded the way people who know real loss nod without words because words aren't enough. Good night, Jesse. Good night, Clara. She closed the door and leaned against it, pressing the back of her hand to her mouth. She didn't cry. She'd stopped crying 2 years ago, but something cracked inside her anyway. The next morning, Clara rode into town. She left Jesse at the ranch with the doors locked and the shotgun loaded, leaning against the kitchen wall. "You know how to use that?" she'd asked. "Papa taught me." "Don't use it unless you have to." "Yes, ma'am." Clara. Copper Ridge was baking in the summer sun. The main street was mostly empty, just a few horses tied up outside the saloon and an old dog sleeping under the general store porch. Clara went to Ruth McAllister's place first. Ruth ran the only restaurant in town, a small building with 6 tables and a kitchen that smelled like biscuits and strong coffee. She was 60 years old, built like a fence post, and had a voice that could stop a bar fight at 30 paces. Her husband had died in the war. Her son had died in the war. She'd buried them both and kept cooking. Clara walked in and sat down at the counter. Ruth looked at her over the top of her spectacles. "Clara Whitfield. Don't usually see you on a Tuesday." "Need to talk to you, Ruth." "Coffee first." "Please." Ruth poured 2 cups and sat down across from her. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't." "Talk." Clara told her everything. The boy, the letter, the tin box, the papers, Edgar Flint. Ruth listened without interrupting. When Clara finished, Ruth set her coffee down slowly. "Robert Holden," Ruth said. "I knew his wife, Margaret, sweet woman, died of fever when the boy was just a baby." "You knew them?" "Knew of them. Robert came through here once years ago asking about Matthew. I told him Matthew was gone. He got real quiet, bought supplies and left." Clara nodded. "He sent his son to me, Ruth. Dying man's wish." "And you took him in?" "What else was I going to do?" Ruth studied her. "You know what's coming, don't you?" "Flint." "Edgar Flint doesn't lose, not around here. He owns the mine, he owns half the buildings in town, and he owns Judge Crawford. That contract Robert signed, the one he was forced into Flint, will use it. He'll say the boy's a ward of the company. He'll say the land reverts to the mining grant. Robert had a legal deed. Won't matter if the judge says it doesn't." Clara's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "So what do I do?" Ruth leaned forward. "You fight. But you fight smart. You don't go waving those papers around until you've got someone who can back them up, someone with authority outside this town." "Like who?" "There's a federal land office in Denver. If Robert's claim was filed properly, they'll have a record. Flint can buy a local judge, but he can't buy the federal government. Not yet, anyway." Clara exhaled. "Denver's a long ride." "It is. And Flint won't wait." The door opened. Both women looked up. A man walked in. Tall, broad-shouldered, maybe 40 or so. He wore a dark hat, a worn leather vest, and moved with the careful ease of someone who'd spent years knowing that any room might hold a threat. His face was weathered-lined around the eyes. He had the look of a man who'd been through something and hadn't come out the other side entirely whole. He stopped just inside the door and looked at Clara. "Mrs. Whitfield." Clara's hand moved instinctively toward her hip, where she kept her knife. "Who's asking?" "Samuel Graves. I knew your husband." Clara didn't move. "A lot of men say they knew my husband." "Matthew Whitfield, 3rd Colorado Infantry. He pulled me out of a river crossing at Glorieta Pass after my horse went down. Carried me to the bank with a bullet in his own shoulder." He paused. "I never got to thank him." Clara studied him. Matthew had told her about Glorieta Pass. Told her about a man he'd pulled from the water. He'd never mentioned a name. "What do you want, Mr. Graves?" "I heard something in town about a mining man named Flint looking for a boy, and I heard the boy might have come this way." Ruth stood up. "Who told you that?" "Man at the saloon. Flint's been asking around, offering money for information about a boy named Jesse Holden, 10 years old, missing from Copper Creek." Clara's blood went cold. He's already looking. He's been looking for 2 weeks. That boy's been walking 5 days, which means Flint's had people searching for 10 days before the boy even got to you. Clara stood. I need to get back to the ranch. Wait. Graves took a step forward, then stopped reading her body language. I want to help. Why? Because I owed Matthew a debt I never paid, and because I know who Edgar Flint is. Everyone knows who Flint is. Not like I do. Graves pulled out a chair and sat down without being invited. Ruth raised an eyebrow, but didn't object. Before I came here, I spent 6 years as a bounty hunter. Worked the territories mostly. I tracked men for the law. 2 years ago, I was hired to bring in a man named Tom Shelby. He'd stolen payroll from a mining company in Nevada. Flint's company? Clara asked. No, but same kind of man, same kind of operation. These mining bosses, they don't just dig ore, they dig graves. They buy land through fraud force out homesteaders file false claims, and when someone pushes back, they disappear them. Cave-ins, fires, accidents. Like Robert. Like Robert. Graves leaned forward. Mrs. Whitfield, if Flint finds out you have those papers, that deed, and that mining claim, he won't ask politely. He'll come with men and guns and a judge's order. And if that doesn't work, he'll come at night. Ruth put her hand on Clara's arm. He's right. Clara looked at Graves. What are you suggesting? Let me stay at the ranch, just till this is settled. You need someone who can watch the road while you figure out the legal side. I can watch my own road. I don't doubt it. But you can't watch the road and take care of that boy and ride to Denver all at the same time. Clara's jaw tightened. She hated this. Hated needing help. Hated that a dead man's letter had cracked open the quiet, careful life she'd built. But he was right. You sleep in the barn, she said. Fair enough. And you don't touch the boy. Don't question him. Don't make him uncomfortable. He's been through enough. Understood. And if I find out you're working for Flint, I'll shoot you myself. Graves almost smiled. Also understood. Ruth looked between them. Well, that's settled then. She reached under the counter and pulled out a wrapped bundle. Biscuits, for the boy. Growing children need to eat. Clara took them. Thank you, Ruth. Ruth caught her hand, held it. Clara, you listen to me. I lost my son to a rich man's war. I buried him in ground I can't even visit. I won't watch another child get taken by a man with money and no soul. Whatever you need, you come to me. Clara nodded. She couldn't speak. If she spoke, she'd break. They rode back to the ranch together, Clara and Graves, in silence. When they crested the last hill, Clara pulled up short. There was a horse tied to her fence, a black horse with a silver-studded saddle. Graves reached for his rifle. Clara raised her hand. Wait! She rode down to the house. A man was sitting on her porch steps. He was maybe 50, dressed in a gray suit, clean boots, a gold watch chain across his vest. He stood when he saw her removing his hat. His hair was silver. His smile was wide and warm and completely wrong. Mrs. Whitfield, he said, I hope you'll forgive the intrusion. My name is Edgar Flint. Clara dismounted slowly. I know who you are. Then you know I'm a reasonable man. His eyes moved to Graves, then back to Clara. I've come about a boy, Jesse Holden. His father worked for my company and passed recently. Tragic accident. The boy's gone missing, and I'm concerned for his safety. His safety. He's 10 years old, alone in the world. No mother, no family. I feel a responsibility. That's generous of you. Flint's smile didn't waver. I understand he may have come this way. Robert Holden and your late husband were acquainted, I believe. Clara said nothing. Flint took a step closer. Mrs. Whitfield, I don't want trouble. I simply want to make sure the boy is cared for. I've already spoken with Judge Crawford about arranging proper guardianship. Guardianship. The boy needs a home, a real home, with resources, education. I can provide that. Can you? I can. His eyes were steady, patient. Mrs. Whitfield, a woman alone on a ranch, no children of her own, no husband. The court would never grant you custody. Surely you understand that. The words hit her like a slap. No children of her own. She felt the old wound tear open, the one that never fully closed. But she didn't flinch. The boy's not here, Clara said. Flint studied her face. Are you sure about that? I'm sure. Because I'd hate for there to be a misunderstanding. If someone were harboring the boy, keeping him from his legal guardian, well, that would be a crime. Legal guardian, Clara repeated. Last I checked, you're not his kin. The law doesn't require blood, Mrs. Whitfield. It requires means and standing. I have both. And Robert Holden? What did he have? Something flickered behind Flint's eyes. Just for a second. Robert was a good man, but he made poor choices. Signed contracts he couldn't honor. Borrowed money he couldn't repay. By the end, he had nothing. Except his son. Yes, except his son. They stood there, the summer heat pressing down on them. Clara felt Graves behind her, silent, watching. Mr. Flint, Clara said, I think you should leave. His smile finally faded. I'm trying to do this the civilized way, Mrs. Whitfield. And I'm telling you, civilized or otherwise, the boy's not here. Flint put his hat back on, adjusted it carefully. I see. Well, if you do happen to hear anything about young Jesse, I'd appreciate you sending word. I'm staying at the hotel in town. He mounted his horse, tipped his hat, and rode off. Clara watched him until he was gone. Then she turned to Graves. He knows, she said. He knows. Clara walked to the house, opened the door, and found Jesse standing in the kitchen, the shotgun in his hands, his face white as chalk. I heard him, Jesse whispered. I heard what he said. Clara knelt down in front of him. She took the shotgun gently from his hands and set it aside. Listen to me, Jesse. That man is not going to take you. He took my papa. I know. He burned my house. I know. He'll burn yours, too. Clara looked at this boy 10 years old, who'd walked 5 days through open country to find a stranger because his dead father told him to. This boy who'd lost everything and still had the courage to stand in her kitchen with a shotgun that was too heavy for him. Let him try, Clara said. Jesse searched her face. Whatever he found there, it was enough. Okay, he said. That night, Clara sat at the kitchen table after Jesse had gone to sleep. She opened the tin box and read Robert's letter again. Then she read it a third time. Then she folded it and held it against her chest. 2 years ago, she'd buried her husband and decided she was done. Done hoping, done praying, done believing that the world had anything left to give her. And now a dead man had sent his son to her door with a box full of proof that the world wasn't done with her yet. She put the letter back in the box and closed the lid. Then she pulled out a piece of paper and started writing a letter to the Federal Land Office in Denver. Outside, Graves sat in the barn doorway, rifle across his knees, watching the road. The summer night was hot and still, no breeze. No sound except the crickets and the slow breathing of the horses. But somewhere north in a hotel room in Copper Ridge, Edgar Flint was writing a letter too, and his wasn't asking for help, it was giving orders. 3 days passed and nothing happened. That was worse than something happening. Clara knew it, Graves knew it, even Jesse knew it, though he didn't say so. He just sat at the kitchen table every morning eating his breakfast, slow eyes drifting to the window, listening. On the 4th morning, Clara found him already dressed and sitting on the porch before sunrise. You're up early, she said. Couldn't sleep. She sat down beside him. Bad dreams. No dreams at all. That's worse. Clara looked at him. How do you figure? When I dream about Papa, at least I get to see him. Clara's chest tightened. She didn't have words for that, so she just sat with him and let the quiet do the talking. Graves came around the side of the barn leading his horse. He'd been riding the perimeter every morning since he arrived, checking for tracks, watching the ridgelines. He stopped when he saw them. "Anything?" Clara asked. "Tracks on the north fence line. 2 riders. Came close, didn't cross. Turned back east toward town. Flint's men. Watching. Waiting." "For what?" Graves tied his horse and walked toward the porch. "For you to make a mistake. Leave the boy alone. Ride to Denver. Give them an opening. So I do nothing. You do everything, just carefully." He looked at Jesse. "Morning, son." "Morning, Mr. Graves." Clara stood. "I sent that letter to the Federal Land Office 4 days ago. Haven't heard back. Mail's slow out here. Could be 2 weeks. We don't have 2 weeks. No," Graves agreed. "We don't." Clara paced the length of the porch. Her boots hit the boards hard, rhythmic, like she was trying to kick an answer out of the wood. "Ruth said Judge Crawford's in Flint's pocket," Clara said. "If Flint files for guardianship, Crawford will sign it. He won't even look at Robert's deed. Then we need someone who outranks Crawford." "The territorial governor," Graves shook his head. "Governor's in Santa Fe. Might as well be on the moon. But there's a federal marshal who rides through this territory. Name's Dalton. Thomas Dalton. I've worked with him before. He's honest." "Where is he?" "Last I heard, he was in Pueblo. That's 3 days' ride." "Then go get him." Graves hesitated. "That means leaving you and the boy alone." "I've been alone for 2 years, Mr. Graves. I can handle a few more days." "This is different. I know what this is." Clara's voice was sharp. "I know exactly what this is. But if we sit here waiting for a letter that might not come, and a judge who's already bought, we lose. Jesse loses." Graves looked at her for a long moment, then at Jesse. 3 days there, 3 days back," Graves said. "I'll push hard, maybe less. Then leave today." He nodded, went to saddle his horse proper. Clara watched him go, then turned to Jesse. "Just you and me for a while." Jesse looked up at her. "I'm not scared. I didn't say you were. But you are." Clara almost denied it. Almost. "Yeah," she said. "A little. Papa used to say being scared means you've got something worth protecting." Clara looked at this boy, this skinny, sunburned 10-year-old boy who talked like a man twice his age and had more courage in his small body than most men she'd known. "Your papa was right," she said. "Graves left within the hour." Clara watched him ride north until he was nothing but a speck against the heat. Then she went inside, loaded the shotgun, and set it by the door. The day passed slow. Clara worked the ranch with Jesse beside her. She taught him how to check the water line, how to read the sky for weather, how to judge if a fence post would hold through winter. He listened, careful, asked smart questions, remembered everything. "You're a quick study," she said. "Papa said I had to be. Said the world doesn't wait for slow learners." "He teach you to read?" "Yes, ma'am. Clara, every night. He'd make me read from the Bible, then from his engineering books. Said if I could understand both God and rock, I'd be all right." Clara smiled. She couldn't help it. "He sounds like Matthew." "Mr. Whitfield. My husband. He was the same way. Believed a man ought to know how to pray and how to think." Jesse was quiet for a moment. "Do you miss him?" "Every day." "Does it get easier?" Clara pulled a fence wire tight, twisted it, cut it. "No, but you get stronger. So it weighs the same, but you can carry it." Jesse thought about that. "I like that." "Good. Now hold this post while I hammer." They worked until the sun was high and the heat drove them inside. Clara made lunch. Jesse set the table without being asked. They ate together, and Clara realized with a jolt that it was the first time in 2 years she'd had someone sitting across from her at that table. The empty chair wasn't empty anymore. After lunch, Jesse pulled out the tin box. He opened it and laid out the contents on the table. The letter, the deed, the mining claim. And something else Clara hadn't noticed before a small photograph creased down the middle. "That's Papa," Jessie said. "And that's Mama." Clara picked it up carefully. A young man, serious face, strong jaw. A woman beside him, dark hair, soft eyes, holding an infant. The baby was Jessie. "She was beautiful," Clara said. "Papa said she was the kindest person he ever knew. Said she could make anyone feel like they mattered." Clara set the photograph down. "Jessie, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." "Okay." "These papers, the deed and the claim, are there copies anywhere?" Jessie shook his head. "Papa said he filed the claim at the territorial office in Denver, but the deed, that's the only one. He said Flint's been trying to get it for a year. That's why he kept it in the box. That's why he gave the box to me. So if Flint gets these papers, he wins. He takes the land, the gold, everything." Clara stared at the documents. A dead man's legacy, a living boy's future, all sitting on her kitchen table next to a plate of cold beans. "We need to make copies," she said. "And we need to get them somewhere safe, somewhere Flint can't reach." "Where?" "Ruth." That afternoon, Clara rode into town with Jessie beside her on Matthew's old mare. She'd thought about leaving him at the ranch, but the memory of Graves's words stopped her. "Don't give them an opening." Copper Ridge was busy for a Tuesday. More horses than usual outside the saloon. Clara noticed 3 men she didn't recognize sitting on the porch of the hotel, watching the street. "Jessie," she said quietly, "keep your hat low. Don't talk to anyone." "Yes, ma'am." They tied up behind Ruth's restaurant and went in through the back door. Ruth was in the kitchen rolling biscuit dough. She looked up, saw them, and her hands went still. "Trouble?" Ruth asked. "Always." Clara set the tin box on the counter. "I need you to keep copies of these, the deed and the claim. Can you do that?" Ruth wiped her hands and opened the box. She read the deed carefully, then the mining claim. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Clara, do you know what this is worth?" "I have an idea. This gold claim alone would be worth more money than this whole town sees in 10 years. If Flint knows about this..." "He knows." Ruth looked at Jessie. The boy stood by the back door, hat pulled low, watching the alley through the crack. "I'll copy them tonight," Ruth said. "I'll keep one set here hidden, and I'll send another set to my sister in Denver with a letter explaining everything." "Your sister?" "Margaret Hale. Her husband's a lawyer. Not a big one, but an honest one. If something happens to us, to all of us, she'll know what to do." Clara reached across the counter and gripped Ruth's hand. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We're a long way from done." The back door opened. Jessie stepped aside as a man walked in. Clara's hand went to her knife. It was Samuel Cross. She didn't know him, but Ruth did. "Sam," Ruth said, "what are you doing coming in my back door?" Cross was a lean man, maybe 55, with gray hair, cropped close, and eyes that didn't miss anything. He held his hat in his hands, turning it slowly. "Mrs. McAllister, forgive the intrusion. I heard something at the saloon. I think Mrs. Whitfield needs to know." Clara stepped forward. "Who are you?" "Samuel Cross. I work at the livery stable. Been in Copper Ridge about 2 years." "What did you hear?" Cross glanced at the back door, then at Jessie, then at Clara. "Flint's got men coming. Hired guns from Silver City. 6 of them, maybe more. They're supposed to arrive by end of the week." Clara's stomach dropped. "Hired guns." "I heard Greer talking about it at the bar. Wasn't exactly keeping his voice down. I think he wanted people to hear, wanted word to spread. To scare me. To scare everyone. Flint's sending a message. Anyone who helps you, anyone who stands with you, they'll answer for it." Ruth slammed her rolling pin on the counter. The sound cracked through the kitchen like a gunshot. "That son of a..." Ruth caught herself glancing at Jessie. "That man thinks he can bully this whole town into silence. He's been doing it for years, Mrs. McAllister. This is just the first time anyone's pushed back. Clara turned to Ruth. I shouldn't have come here. If Flint finds out you're involved... Clara Whitfield, don't you dare. Don't you dare try to protect me by shutting me out. I buried a husband and a son. I've got nothing left to lose and nothing left to fear. If that man wants to threaten me, he can come say it to my face. Jesse spoke from the doorway. His voice was quiet, but clear. Mrs. McAllister. Ruth looked at him. Yes, honey. My papa used to say that one person standing alone is a target, but a whole bunch of people standing together is a wall. Ruth stared at him. Then she laughed, a short, sharp sound that was half sob. Smart boy, she said. Just like his father. Cross put his hat back on. Mrs. Whitfield, I don't know you, but I know what Flint is. He took my brother's claim 3 years ago. Falsified papers, bribed the judge, same playbook. My brother lost everything and drank himself to death. I've been waiting for someone to stand up to that man, and I'm not going to watch from the sidelines. What can you do? Clara asked. I know horses. I know the land. And I know how to shoot. You tell me where to be, and I'll be there. Clara looked at him, looked at Ruth, looked at Jesse by the door, his small face set and determined. 4 people. An old woman, a stable hand, a widow, and a boy. Against Edgar Flint and his hired guns. It wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. But it was a start. Cross, Clara said. How many people in this town have been hurt by Flint? More than you'd think. He's got his hands in everything. The mine, the store, the water rights. Half the ranchers east of here have been squeezed at some point. But they're scared. Terrified. What would it take to make them less scared? Cross thought about it. Proof. Proof that Flint can be beaten. Proof that standing up to him won't get them killed. Clara tapped the tin box. I've got proof that he murdered a man for his land. I've got a legal deed that says he's been lying about his mining grant for years. That's paper proof. People around here need to see it, need to believe it. Ruth leaned forward. Then we show them. Sunday service. Everyone in town comes to church, even Flint's men. You want to do this in church? Clara asked. I want to do this where God can hear it, and where Flint can't make people disappear without the whole town watching. Clara thought about it. Sunday was 5 days away. Graves wouldn't be back with the marshal for at least 6, and Flint's hired guns would arrive before either. It's risky, Clara said. Everything worth doing is risky, Ruth said. You told me you stopped praying 2 years ago. Maybe it's time to start again. Clara didn't answer that. They left Ruth's through the back. Clara and Jesse rode out of town the long way, circling south to avoid the main road. As they crested the hill above the ranch, Clara pulled up short. A wagon was parked in her yard. 2 men were walking around the house looking in windows. Get behind me, Clara said. She pulled the rifle from the saddle scabbard and rode down. The men heard her coming and turned. One was Greer Flint's man. The other she didn't recognize, younger, nervous, fidgeting with his hat. You're on my property, Clara said. The rifle was across her saddle, pointed nowhere specific, pointed everywhere. Greer smiled. He was a thick man with bad teeth and small eyes. Mrs. Whitfield, just paying a friendly visit. I don't recall inviting you. Mr. Flint sent us. Wanted to check on you. Make sure you're getting along all right out here by yourself. I'm getting along fine. Greer's eyes moved past her to Jesse. The boy sat on his horse, stiff and pale. Greer's smile widened. That the Holden boy? Clara's finger found the trigger. That's none of your business. Oh, I think it is. Mr. Flint's got a legal interest in that child. Judge Crawford signed the papers this morning. Temporary guardianship pending a hearing. Clara's blood went cold. Temporary guardianship. That's right. Which means that boy belongs to Mr. Flint now. Legally speaking. Legally speaking, you're trespassing, and I've got a rifle that doesn't care much about legal." Greer's smile faded. The younger man took a step back. "Mrs. Whitfield." Greer said, his voice dropping low. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Just give us the boy and this all goes away." "Nothing goes away. You and I both know that. Mr. Flint is a generous man. He's prepared to offer you compensation for your trouble." "Compensation. $500. That's more than this ranch is worth." Clara stared at him. $500. That was a fortune. That was 2 years of survival. That was new equipment, new horses, a future. And all she had to do was hand over a 10-year-old boy to the man who'd killed his father. "Get off my land," Clara said, "and tell Flint his money's no good here." Greer's jaw tightened. "You're going to regret this." "Maybe, but not today." Greer looked at her for a long moment, then at the rifle. Then he turned, jerked his head at the younger man, and they climbed onto the wagon. As they pulled away, Greer called back over his shoulder, "Judge Crawford's holding a hearing Monday morning, 9 o'clock. If you don't bring the boy, the sheriff will come get him. And Mrs. Whitfield, the sheriff, works for Mr. Flint, too." They rode off in a cloud of dust. Clara didn't lower the rifle until they were gone. Jesse rode up beside her. His hands were shaking on the reins. "Monday," he said. "Monday. That's 6 days." "I can count, Jesse." He looked at her. "Are you going to give me to him?" Clara turned to face him. She looked him dead in the eyes, and she said it plain, the way Matthew would have said it, the way Robert would have said it, the way any person with a beating heart and a working conscience would have said it. "Not if I die first." Jesse's eyes filled up. He blinked hard, fighting it. He was 10 years old, and he was fighting tears because he'd already learned that crying didn't fix anything. Clara reached over and put her hand on his shoulder. "It's all right to cry, Jesse. Doesn't make you weak, makes you human." He broke. The tears came hard, shaking his whole body. Clara pulled him off his horse and held him right there in the yard in the dust, and the summer heat held him while he sobbed into her shirt. She didn't tell him it would be okay. She didn't make promises she might not keep. She just held him, and she let him feel what he needed to feel. When it passed, he pulled back, wiping his face with his sleeve. "Sorry," he mumbled. "Don't be." "Papa would say men don't cry." "Your papa ever cry?" Jesse paused. "Once, when Mama died." "Then I'd say men do cry. They just pick the right time." Jesse almost smiled. "Clara." "Yeah. I'm glad Papa sent me to you." Her throat closed up. She couldn't speak, so she just squeezed his shoulder and walked the horses to the barn. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table with the tin box open in front of her, Robert's letter smoothed flat. She read it again, her finger tracing his rough handwriting. "Don't let him take my son. You're the only person I trust." She picked up a pencil and a piece of paper. She started making a list. Not of things she needed. Of people. Ruth, Cross, Graves if he made it back in time. The Reverend maybe. Who else? Who in this town had enough backbone and enough reason to stand against Edgar Flint? She thought about what Cross had said. Half the ranchers east of here have been squeezed. That meant they had reason to fight. They just needed someone to go first. Clara Whitfield had never thought of herself as a leader. She was a widow, a rancher, a woman who talked to her dead husband's grave because she didn't know how to talk to God anymore. But a dead man had trusted her with his son, and a living man with money and power and hired guns was trying to take that boy away. She folded the paper and put it in her pocket. Tomorrow she'd ride east. She'd knock on doors. She'd ask for help the same way Robert Holden had asked her, not because she deserved it, but because a child's life was worth more than pride. She closed the tin box and laid her hand flat on top of it. "I won't let him down, Robert," she whispered. "I promise." In the back room, Jesse was asleep, his hand resting on the pillow next to him, fingers curled around nothing, the way a child does when he's used to holding someone's hand in the dark and the hand isn't there anymore. And in Copper Ridge, in the back room of the hotel, Edgar Flint sat at a desk writing 3 letters, one to Judge Crawford, one to the sheriff, and one to a man in Silver City whose name people only said in whispers. The clock was ticking. Monday was coming, and everyone in Copper Ridge was about to find out what they were willing to fight for. Clara rode east at first light. She left Jesse with Ruth at the restaurant, the tin box locked in Ruth's hidden safe behind a loose brick in the kitchen wall. Ruth had a pistol under the counter and a temper that could stop a charging bull. Jesse would be all right. The first ranch she hit was the Dawson place. Tom Dawson had been running cattle on 300 acres for 20 years. Clara had heard he'd lost grazing rights to Flint's company 2 summers back when Flint rerouted the creek that fed Dawson's north pasture. She rode up to the house and found Dawson on the porch whittling a stick into nothing. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, not looking up. "Long way from home. Need to talk to you, Tom." "About what?" "Edgar Flint." His hand stopped. The knife hovered over the stick. He didn't look up for a long time. "Don't want to talk about Flint." "I know you don't, but I need you to listen. Last person who talked to me about Flint was my lawyer, right before Flint bought him." Dawson set the stick down. "What do you want, Clara?" She told him. All of it. The boy, the letter, the gold claim, the forged mining grant, the hearing on Monday. She told him about the hired guns coming from Silver City, and about Flint's men watching her ranch. When she finished, Dawson was quiet. "That's a hell of a thing," he said. "It is." "And you want me to what? Stand up in court and say Flint's a crook?" "I want you to stand up, period. You lost that creek because Flint filed a false water claim. You know it. I know it. Half the county knows it. Knowing and proving are 2 different animals." "I've got proof, Tom. I've got a legal deed that shows Flint's mining grant doesn't cover the Holden land. If that grant is false there, it might be false everywhere, including your creek." Dawson looked at her for the first time. Something moved behind his eyes. Not hope exactly. More like the memory of hope. "You really think you can beat him?" "I think I have to try. And I think you do too." Dawson picked up his stick again, turned it in his hands. "My wife's sick, Clara. Lungs. She needs medicine I can barely afford. If Flint comes after me, if he cuts off what little I've got left. If Flint wins this, he takes the Holden gold claim. That's more money than God. You think he'll stop there? You think he won't come for every piece of land between here and the mountains?" Dawson didn't answer. Clara didn't push. She'd said what she came to say. She was halfway to her horse when Dawson called out. "Monday, you said." "Monday, 9 o'clock, the courthouse." "I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." She rode to 3 more ranches that morning. Ed Buckley, who'd had his cattle poisoned after he refused to sell his water rights. Sarah Jennings, a widow like Clara, who'd been taxed off her land through a deal Flint made with the county assessor. And Old Man Harper, 72 years old, who'd lost his son to a mine collapse that Flint's company called an accident. Every conversation was the same. Fear first. Then anger. Then the careful, beaten-down silence of people who'd been losing for so long they'd forgotten what winning looked like. None of them said yes. None of them said no. Clara rode back to town in the afternoon heat, her shirt soaked through her throat dry, her hands aching from gripping the reins too hard. She found Jesse in Ruth's kitchen, helping wash dishes. He'd rolled his sleeves up and tied an apron around his waist that hung past his knees. "How'd it go?" Ruth asked. "They're scared." "Course they're scared. Flint's been scaring them for years." "Fear doesn't break easy." Ruth dried her hands. "No, it doesn't. But you know what breaks fear?" "What?" "Something to lose that's worse than what Flint can take." Ruth nodded toward Jesse. "That boy right there. People see a child being taken from a good home by a man who killed his father. That's not politics. That's not business. That's right and wrong. And people in this town still know the difference, even if they've been pretending they don't." Clara looked at Jesse. He was scrubbing a pot with more concentration than the task required, but his ears were red. He was listening. "Jesse," Clara said. He looked up. "How'd you like to come to church on Sunday?" Jesse's eyebrows went up. "Church. Ruth's got an idea." "Is it a dangerous idea?" Ruth laughed. "Honey, all the best ideas are." They were walking to the horses when Clara saw him. A man standing across the street, leaning against the barbershop wall. Young, maybe 25, with a tied-down holster and a flat expression that said he wasn't from around here and didn't care who knew it. He was watching them. Clara put her hand on Jesse's back and kept walking. Didn't speed up. Didn't slow down. "Clara," Jesse whispered. "I see him. He's one of them, the Silver City men." "How do you know?" "Because he's wearing the same kind of holster Mr. Greer wears, low and tied. Papa told me that's how gunfighters carry." Clara's hand tightened on Jesse's shoulder. "Keep walking." They mounted up and rode out. Clara didn't look back, but she could feel the man's eyes on her the whole way. That night, Clara sat at the kitchen table with the shotgun on one side and Robert's letter on the other. Jesse was in the back room. She could hear him turning in the bed, restless. She picked up the letter and read it again. She'd read it so many times now the creases were wearing thin. One more fold, and it might fall apart. "Don't let him take my son." She put it down and pressed her palms flat on the table. Her wedding ring caught the lamplight. She twisted it once. Twice. "Matthew," she said to the empty room, "I could really use your help." Nothing answered. Nothing ever did. But she said it anyway, because sometimes just saying a name out loud was enough to make you feel less alone. A knock at the door. Clara grabbed the shotgun and moved to the side of the window. She peered out. Cross. Samuel Cross from the livery stable standing on her porch hat in hand. She opened the door. "Cross. It's past 10. "I know. Wouldn't come this late if it wasn't important." He was breathing hard like he'd ridden fast. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. Cross walked to the table and sat down without asking. "Flint's men arrived tonight," he said. 7 of them. Not 6. They rode in after dark, went straight to the hotel. Flint met them in the lobby. I was in the stable across the street. I saw 7 hired guns. And Greer and Flint himself and the 2 men who've been watching your ranch. That's 11. Against me and a 10-year-old boy. And me. And Mrs. McAllister." Cross paused. "And maybe some others." Clara looked at him. "What others?" "After you left today, I went to see Ed Buckley. We talked for a long time. He's in, Clara. He's scared, but he's in. And he thinks the Harper boy, young Will, the one whose brother died in the mine, he'll come too. That's 2 more. It's a start. And I went by the Jennings ranch on the way back. Sarah wasn't home, but her foreman was. Big fellow named Dixon. He said if Sarah gives the word, he'll be there." Clara sat down across from him. Something was building in her chest. Not hope. Not yet. But the raw material hope was made from. "Cross, why are you doing this? You barely know me." "I told you. Flint took my brother's claim. My brother's dead because of it. I've been living in this town for 2 years, keeping my head down, telling myself it wasn't my fight. But watching that boy in Ruth's kitchen today washing dishes with an apron down to his ankles, I realized something." "What?" "It's always been my fight. I was just too much of a coward to admit it." Clara shook her head. "You're not a coward. You're here." "I'm here because a widow and a 10-year-old boy shamed me into it. That's not bravery. That's embarrassment." Clara almost laughed. Almost. "Whatever gets you through the door." Cross stood. "There's one more thing. Flint's filing the guardianship motion tomorrow morning. Greer was bragging about it at the saloon. Said Judge Crawford's going to grant it and issue a warrant for Jesse's removal." "A warrant?" "Sheriff Tucker will serve it." Probably by end of day tomorrow. Clara's hands went cold. That's Saturday. The hearing was supposed to be Monday. Flint moved it up. Crawford signed the order tonight. He can't do that. He can if nobody stops him. Clara stood so fast her chair scraped back. Her mind was racing. Saturday. That was tomorrow. Graves wouldn't be back with the marshal until Sunday at the earliest. The federal letter was still somewhere between here and Denver. And Flint had just moved up the timeline by 2 days. "How long do I have?" she asked. "Sheriff Tucker's a lazy man. He won't ride out before noon, maybe later if he's been drinking." "That gives me the morning?" "To do what?" Clara looked at him. "To do something I should have done 5 days ago." "Clara, go home cross, get some sleep, and be at Ruth's by 8 tomorrow morning." Cross studied her face. Whatever he saw there, he didn't argue with it. He put his hat on and left. Clara went to the back room. Jesse was awake, sitting up in bed, the wooden horse Matthew had carved clutched in his hands. "I heard," he said. "I know. They're coming for me tomorrow. They're going to try." Jesse's chin trembled, but he held it. "What are you going to do?" Clara knelt beside the bed. "Jesse, do you trust me?" "Yes." "Then trust me when I say this. No one is taking you out of this house. Not tomorrow. Not ever. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Say it back to me." "No one is taking me." "That's right." She stood. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "Clara." "Yeah. If something happens to you, if they... Nothing's going to happen to me. But if it does..." His voice was small. "Will you end up under the cottonwood tree next to Mr. Whitfield?" Clara's heart cracked clean in half. She sat down on the edge of the bed and took his hand. "Jesse Holden, you listen to me. I'm not going under any tree. Not today, not tomorrow, not for a long, long time. And neither are you. We're going to be sitting on that porch together watching you ride horses until you're too old to stay in the saddle. You hear me? I hear you. Good. Now sleep." She kissed the top of his head. It happened without thinking, natural as breathing, and she was halfway out the door before she realized what she'd done. She stopped, stood there, felt something shift inside her. Something that had been locked down and buried for 2 years. She didn't name it. Not yet. Morning came fast. Clara was up before dawn. She dressed, loaded the shotgun, strapped the knife to her belt, and woke Jesse. "Get dressed. We're going to town." "Now. Right now." They rode hard. Clara pushed the horses faster than she should have in the heat, but time was a luxury she didn't have anymore. They reached Copper Ridge just as the sun cleared the ridgeline. Ruth was already at the restaurant. So was Cross. And sitting at the corner table drinking coffee like he owned the place was someone Clara didn't expect. Tom Dawson. He stood when she walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept. "I thought about it," he said. And my wife told me if I didn't get off that porch and do something decent for once in my miserable life, she'd leave me for the preacher." Ruth snorted. "Smart woman." "She is." Dawson looked at Clara. "I'm in, whatever you need." Before Clara could answer, the back door opened. Ed Buckley walked in, big and sunburned and nervous. Behind him was a young man with a hard jaw and harder eyes. "Will Harper," Buckley said. "His brother was killed in Flint's mine last year." Will Harper nodded at Clara. "Ma'am." "You know what you're signing up for?" Clara asked. "I know what Flint did to my brother. That's enough." The front door opened. Sarah Jennings walked in, tall and thin, with steel-gray hair and the kind of posture that said she'd never back down from anything in her life. Behind her was Dixon, her foreman, a man built like a barn door. "Heard you were making trouble," Sarah said to Clara. "Something like that." "Good. I've been waiting for someone to make trouble for that man for 5 years." She sat down at the table. "What's the plan?" Clara looked around the room. Ruth behind the counter, Cross by the window, Dawson Buckley Will Harper, Sarah Jennings Dixon, Jesse standing by the back door watching everything with those two old eyes. 8 people, plus Graves if he made it back. 9, against Flint and 11 men. In a town where the judge and the sheriff both worked for the enemy. Clara took a breath. Flint moved the hearing up. Judge Crawford issued a warrant for Jesse's removal. Sheriff Tucker will come for him today, probably by noon. The room went quiet. "We can't stop the sheriff," Clara said. "Not with force. He's the law, corrupt or not. If we resist a warrant, we're criminals." "Then what do we do?" Buckley asked. "We don't resist. We make the warrant worthless." Ruth leaned forward. "How?" Clara pulled a piece of paper from her coat. She'd written it at the kitchen table at 3 a.m. by lamplight with shaking hands and a clear head. "This is a petition, addressed to the territorial governor and the federal land office. It states that Judge Crawford has a financial relationship with Edgar Flint that disqualifies him from ruling on any matter involving Flint's interests. It cites Flint's forged mining grant, the fraudulent water claims, the suspicious deaths at his mines, and the coerced contracts he's used to steal land. And it's signed by every person in this room." Silence. "Once this petition is filed, any order Crawford issues is subject to federal review. That includes the guardianship order and the warrant." "Filed where?" Sarah asked. "Denver, the territorial governor's office." "That's days away," Buckley said. "Ruth's already sent copies of the deed and mining claim to her sister in Denver. Her sister's husband is a lawyer. If we get this petition to them, they can file it Monday morning." "And until then?" Cross asked. "Until then, we need to buy time, and we need to make sure this town sees what Flint is doing, not behind closed doors, not in backroom deals, in the open, where everyone can see." "Sunday service," Ruth said. Clara nodded. "Reverend Keller's agreed to let us speak. Every family in town will be there." "Flint's men too," Cross said. "I'm counting on it." Dawson shook his head. "You're crazy." "Probably. I like it." The front door opened again, and the room went tense. Every hand moved toward a weapon. Reverend Keller stepped in, hat in one hand, Bible in the other. He looked around the room at the faces staring back at him. "I see I'm late," he said. "Good. I hate making speeches." He sat down at the table. "I visited Judge Crawford this morning. Tried to talk sense into him. Told him what Flint was doing was wrong. Told him God sees everything, even what happens in courtrooms." "And," Clara asked, "he told me to mind my church, and he'd mind his court. Then Greer showed up, and Crawford stopped talking to me altogether." "So Crawford's a lost cause." "Crawford's a frightened man. There's a difference." Keller folded his hands. "But I did learn something. The guardianship order has a condition. Flint has to demonstrate that the boy has no suitable guardian. That's why he's pushing so hard. If he can show that Jesse has no legal family, no responsible adult willing to take formal custody, the court defaults to Flint as the petitioner." Clara's heart stopped. "Formal custody," she repeated. "Legal adoption. If someone files to adopt Jesse before Flint's order goes through, it creates a competing claim. Crawford can't grant guardianship to Flint if there's a legitimate adoption petition on file." The room went silent. Every pair of eyes turned to Clara. She felt it, the weight of it, the enormity of what was being asked without anyone saying a word. She looked at Jesse. He was standing by the door perfectly still, his face unreadable, but his eyes, those eyes that had seen too much, were locked on hers. "If I file to adopt him," Clara said slowly, "Crawford will try to block it." "He'll try," Keller said. "But adoption petitions go through the territorial office, not the county court. Crawford can delay, but he can't deny it outright. It buys you time." "How much time?" "Enough for your petition to reach Denver. Enough for the federal review." Clara's throat was dry. Her hands were shaking. She gripped the edge of the table. She thought about Matthew, about the 2 babies she'd lost, about the empty room that wasn't empty anymore, about a 10-year-old boy who'd walked 5 days to find her because his dying father said she was the only person he trusted. "Where do I sign?" Clara said. Jessie's breath caught. Just a small sound, barely audible, but Clara heard it. Keller pulled a document from his Bible. "I took the liberty. I hope you don't mind." Clara took the paper. An adoption petition. Jessie Holden, minor child. Clara Whitfield, petitioner. She read it once. Then she picked up the pencil Keller offered and signed her name. The room let out a breath no one knew they'd been holding. Jessie walked forward. Slowly, like he was afraid it might not be real. He stopped in front of Clara and looked at the paper with her name on it. "Does this mean?" he started. "It means I'm not just keeping you safe, Jessie. I'm keeping you, if you'll have me." Jessie's face crumbled. Not with sadness, with something so big and so raw that his 10-year-old body couldn't hold it. He threw his arms around Clara's waist and held on like the world was trying to pull him away, and she was the only thing anchoring him to the earth. Clara held him. She held him the way she'd wanted to hold the children she'd never had. She held him the way a mother holds a son. Ruth was crying. She didn't bother hiding it. Dawson was looking at the floor, blinking hard. Even Cross, the man who said he'd been a coward for 2 years, had to turn away and clear his throat. "All right," Ruth said, wiping her eyes. "That's the easy part. Now comes the hard part." She was right. At noon, Sheriff Tucker rode up to Clara's ranch. Clara was waiting on the porch with the shotgun in her lap. Jessie was inside. Cross and Dawson were positioned at the fence line, visible, but not threatening. Tucker was a heavy man on a heavy horse. He dismounted with effort and walked toward the house, a folded paper in his hand. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said. He didn't look happy about being there. "Sheriff, I've got a court order here from Judge Crawford. Says I'm to take custody of Jessie Holden, minor child, and deliver him to Edgar Flint pending a guardianship hearing." "I've seen it." "Then you know I'm obligated to." "I've also filed an adoption petition with the territorial office. As of this morning, Jessie Holden is legally my son. Your court order names a child with no guardian. Jessie has a guardian. Me." Tucker stared at her. His mouth opened, then closed. "Mrs. Whitfield, I don't..." "Crawford didn't mention." "Crawford didn't know. He does now." Clara held up her copy of the petition, signed and witnessed by Reverend Keller. "You want to take a child from his legal mother, Sheriff, in front of witnesses." Tucker looked at the paper, looked at Cross and Dawson by the fence, looked back at Clara. "This don't change the court order." "It does until the territorial office rules otherwise, and you know it." Tucker was sweating, not from the heat, from the realization that he was standing between a corrupt judge and a woman with a shotgun who'd just adopted a dead man's son. I'll need to talk to Judge Crawford." "You do that." Tucker folded the warrant, stuffed it in his pocket, mounted his horse, and rode back to town without another word. Clara watched him go. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. Cross walked up from the fence. "That won't hold forever." "It doesn't have to. Just until Sunday." "And if Flint doesn't wait until Sunday?" Clara looked at him. "Then we don't wait either." That evening, a rider came from town. Fast. Clara grabbed the rifle and went to the porch. It was Will Harper riding hard dust, billowing behind him. He pulled up at the gate and didn't dismount. "Clara, Flint knows about the adoption. He went to Crawford. Crawford's furious. He's issued a new order, says the adoption is fraudulent and void. Sheriff Tucker's been told to enforce it by force if necessary." "When?" "Tomorrow morning, first light." Clara gripped the rifle. "Tomorrow's Sunday." "I know." "Church day." "I know." Clara looked out at the road. The same road Jessie had walked down barefoot and half dead, carrying a tin box with everything that mattered inside it. "Then we'll be at church. Clara said. All of us. Every single one. Harper nodded. I'll spread the word. He turned his horse and rode back toward town. Clara went inside. Jesse was at the table. The tin box opened, the photograph of his parents in his hands. Jesse? He looked up. Tomorrow we're going to church. Is it going to be a regular church service? Clara sat down across from him. No, it's going to be the most important day of your life. And mine. Are you scared? Terrified. Jesse put the photograph back in the box and closed the lid. He pushed it across the table to Clara. Hold on to this for me, he said. Mama and Papa would want you to have it. Clara took the box. She held it against her chest, the same way Jesse had held it when he collapsed at her gate. I'll keep it safe, she said. I know you will. Jesse stood. Good night, Mama. The word hit Clara like a thunderbolt. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She sat at that table holding a dead man's tin box while the boy she'd just legally claimed as her own walked into the back room and closed the door. Mama. She pressed her hand to her mouth. The tears came. For the first time in 2 years, Clara Whitfield cried. Not for Matthew, not for the babies she'd lost, not for herself. For the boy who'd just given her the only thing he had left to give. A name she'd never thought she'd hear. Clara didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table until the lamp burned low the tin box in front of her, her hands flat on either side of it like she was holding down something that might fly away. The word echoed through her. Mama. She'd carried the ghost of that word for years, felt it pressing against her ribs every time she passed the empty room, every time she saw a child in town, every time she woke up reaching for a cradle that wasn't there. And now a boy she'd known for 10 days had given it to her like it was nothing, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She wiped her face, stood, and checked the shotgun. Then she checked the rifle. Then she checked the pistol Matthew had kept in the drawer by the bed. She loaded all three and set them on the table in a row. Outside the night was still. No riders, no hoofbeats. Just the sound of the horses shifting in the barn and the wind moving through the grass. She sat back down and waited for dawn. It came slow the way Sunday mornings do, like the world knew something was about to change and was taking its time getting there. Jesse was up before she called him. He came out of the back room, dressed in his cleanest shirt, the one Ruth had given him, his hair combed flat with water. He looked at the 3 guns on the table. We taking all of those? The rifle stays here. The shotgun goes in the wagon. The pistol goes in my coat. What about me? Clara looked at him. You stay close to me. That's your job. I can help. You are helping by being brave enough to walk into that church. Jesse straightened his shoulders. I can do that. I know you can. They loaded up the wagon. Clara tucked the shotgun under a blanket on the seat, put the tin box in her coat pocket, and tied the horses. Jesse climbed up beside her and sat with his hands in his lap, still as stone. As they pulled onto the road, Clara saw Cross riding toward them from the east. He fell in alongside the wagon without a word. A minute later, Dawson appeared from the south riding his old bay mare. Then, Buckley coming up fast from behind. By the time they reached the edge of town, there were 7 of them. Clara and Jesse in the wagon. Cross, Dawson, Buckley, Will Harper, and Dixon on horseback. Sarah Jennings was already at the church. Ruth was waiting at the restaurant ready to come over when the service started. They rode through Copper Ridge in a line. Folks on the street stopped and stared. Clara saw curtains pull back in windows, doors crack open. People were watching. Good. She wanted them to watch. They reached the church and Clara pulled the wagon up front. She helped Jesse down and took his hand. His fingers were cold despite the heat. You all right? She asked. My stomach hurts. That's just nerves. It hurts a lot. Clara squeezed his hand. When your papa walked into that mine every day, you think his stomach didn't hurt? Jesse looked up at her. He went anyway. He went anyway. Jesse nodded. They walked in together. The church was already half full. Families Clara recognized, ranchers and shop owners and their wives and children. They turned when she entered. Some nodded. Some looked away. Some stared at Jesse with the open curiosity of people who'd heard the rumors but hadn't seen the boy for themselves. Clara walked to the front row and sat down. Jesse sat beside her, pressed close. Cross took a position near the back door. Dawson and Buckley sat in the middle pews. Will Harper stood against the side wall, arms crossed, watching the door. Ruth came in through the side entrance and sat next to Clara. She reached over and patted Jesse's knee. "You look handsome," Ruth whispered. "I look scared," Jesse whispered back. "Same thing at your age." Reverend Keller stepped up to the pulpit. He looked out at his congregation, and Clara could see the weight in his eyes. He knew what was coming. They all did. "Good morning," Keller said. "Before we begin today's service, I'd like to say something. This is the Lord's house. Whatever happens within these walls, I ask that it be done with respect, with truth, and with the understanding that God sees all, even the things we try to hide." He paused. His eyes moved across the room, landing on faces holding. "I'd like to invite Clara Whitfield to speak." A murmur went through the church. Clara stood. Her legs felt like water. She turned to face the congregation, and for a moment the words wouldn't come. She saw the faces looking back at her, some sympathetic, some nervous, some hostile. Then she felt Jesse's hand on the back of her coat, just resting there, a small hand holding her steady. "Most of you know me," Clara said. "I'm Matthew Whitfield's widow. I run a ranch west of town. I don't come to church much. I don't come to town much. I've spent the last 2 years trying to disappear, and I was doing a pretty good job of it." A few people shifted. Someone coughed. 10 days ago, a boy showed up at my door. He'd walked 5 days from Copper Creek alone, barefoot, carrying a tin box with a letter inside. The letter was from his father, Robert Holden. Some of you knew Robert. He was a miner, a good man. He's dead. The murmur grew louder. Robert was killed in a cave-in at the Flint Mining Company. It was called an accident. It wasn't. Robert Holden was murdered because he found gold on his own land, and Edgar Flint wanted it. The church went dead silent. "I have proof." Clara pulled the documents from the tin box. A legal deed showing Robert Holden owned his land outright. A mining claim filed with the territorial office, stamped and recorded, and a letter from a dying man who knew exactly who was coming for him and why. She held up the papers so everyone could see. "Edgar Flint has been telling this town that his mining grant covers the Holden land. It doesn't. The grant is forged. And if it's forged there, how many of your claims has he stolen with the same lie?" She looked at Dawson. He stood up slowly. "He took my creek," Dawson said. His voice was rough. "Filed a water claim that said the creek ran through company land. It doesn't. It never did. I lost half my grazing because of that claim." Sarah Jennings stood next. "He had the county assessor raise my taxes 300%. I couldn't pay. He offered to buy my land for a quarter of what it's worth. When I refused, he raised them again." Ed Buckley stood. "My cattle were poisoned. 12 head. No one could prove who did it. But it happened the week after I refused to sell my water rights to Flint's company." Will Harper's voice came from the side wall. "My brother died in that mine. They said it was an accident. Same thing they said about Robert Holden. Same words. Same lie." The church was buzzing now. People talking, whispering, turning to each other. Clara saw fear and anger and something else, recognition. The recognition of people who'd known the truth all along, but had been too afraid to say it. The front door of the church opened. Edgar Flint walked in. He was dressed in his gray suit hat, in hand smile on his face. Behind him came Greer and 2 of the hired men from Silver City. They stopped just inside the door. The church went silent. Flint looked around the room like a man surveying property he already owned. His eyes found Clara. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, This is quite a performance. It's not a performance, Mr. Flint. It's the truth. The truth. Flint took a step forward. You mean the ravings of a desperate woman who's been harboring a ward of the court, a woman who filed a fraudulent adoption petition to obstruct justice. There's nothing fraudulent about it. Judge Crawford disagrees, and so does the law. He turned to face the congregation. Folks, I'm sorry you're being dragged into this. Mrs. Whitfield has taken in a child who is legally under my guardianship. I've tried to resolve this privately, but she's chosen to make it a public spectacle. Because the public deserves to know, Clara shot back. Know what? That a woman with no children, no husband, and no means is trying to keep a boy she has no legal right to. The words hit Clara like a fist. No children. She felt the old wound rip open, felt the blood of it spreading through her chest. But she didn't flinch. I have every right. I'm his mother. You're his kidnapper. The congregation gasped. Jesse stood up from the pew. His face was white, his hands were shaking, but his voice was clear. She didn't kidnap me. My papa sent me to her. He told me to find her because she was the only person he trusted. Because her husband saved his life and he knew she was good. Flint looked down at Jesse. Something shifted behind his eyes just for a second. Then the smile came back. Son, you're confused. You've been through a terrible ordeal. Your father's death was a tragedy, and Mrs. Whitfield has taken advantage of your grief. Don't call me son. Jesse's voice cracked but didn't break. You're not my father. You killed my father. The silence that followed was absolute. Nobody breathed. Nobody moved. Flint's smile vanished. That's a very serious accusation, boy. It's the truth. Papa told me you were coming. He told me you wanted our land. He told me you'd kill him to get it. And he was right. Flint turned to Greer. Get the sheriff. The sheriff's not coming. The voice came from the back of the church. Everyone turned. Samuel Graves stood in the doorway. He was covered in trail dust, his hat pushed back, his face burned by days of hard riding. And beside him, taller by a head, wearing a federal badge on his chest, was a man Clara had never seen before. Thomas Dalton, Graves said, United States Federal Marshal. Flint's face changed. For the first time since Clara had known him, the mask cracked. Just for a second. Then it was back smooth and controlled. Marshal Dalton, Flint said. This is unexpected. Dalton walked up the center aisle. He was a lean man, gray at the temples, with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to announce itself. He stopped in front of Flint. Mr. Flint, I've been briefed on the situation. I've reviewed the documents Mrs. Whitfield has filed, including a land deed and mining claim that contradict your company's grant. Those documents are forgeries. That's possible. It's also possible that your grant is the forgery. The Territorial Land Office will decide. In the meantime, I'm ordering a stay on all court proceedings related to the Holden estate, including the guardianship order issued by Judge Crawford. You can't do that. I can, and I have. Federal authority supersedes county court in matters involving territorial land claims. Judge Crawford's orders are suspended pending review. Flint's jaw was tight. This is temporary. Most things are. I have rights, Marshal. Legal rights. I have a contract. You have a contract signed by a man who's now dead under suspicious circumstances, granting you custody of his child in exchange for a debt. I've seen slave papers with more legitimacy. The congregation stirred. Someone in the back said amen loud enough for everyone to hear. Flint pointed at Clara. This woman has poisoned this town against me. From what I can see, you managed that on your own. Dalton turned to the congregation. Folks, I'll be conducting a full investigation into the Flint Mining Company's land claims contracts and business practices. If any of you have information, evidence, or testimony, I'll be at the hotel for the next week, Anything you share will be handled with the full protection of federal law." Dawson stood up again. "I've got evidence. Tax records, water claims, all of it." "So do I," Sarah Jennings said. "My brother's death was no accident," Will Harper said. "There were witnesses, minors who were there. They were too scared to talk before." "They're not scared now," Buckley added. One by one people stood. Not everyone, not even most, but enough. 8, 10, 12 people rising from their pews, faces set, voices steady. Clara watched it happen and felt something break open inside her. Not sadness, not grief. Something bigger. The realization that she wasn't alone, that she hadn't been alone since the moment Jesse collapsed at her gate. Flint watched it too. His face was stone. His eyes moved from person to person, counting, calculating. "You're making a mistake," he said. His voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge to it now. "All of you." "The only mistake was keeping quiet this long," Ruth said from the front pew. She stood up, all 5 feet of her, and looked Flint dead in the eye. "I lost my son in your war, Mr. Flint. Not the real war. Your war. The one you've been fighting against decent people for 10 years. My boy went to work in your mine because there was no other work. And he died in a tunnel you knew wasn't safe because fixing it would have cost you money." The church went silent again. Ruth's voice was shaking, but she didn't stop. "You want to know why I'm standing here? Because that boy," she pointed at Jesse, "lost his father the same way I lost my son. And I'll be damned if I watch another child pay for your greed." Flint stared at her. For a long, terrible moment, Clara thought he might say something cruel, something vicious. But he didn't. He just looked at Ruth McAllister, 60 years old, 5 feet tall, trembling with fury, and he said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Dalton stepped forward. "Mr. Flint, I'd advise you and your men to leave. This investigation will proceed with or without your cooperation, but I'd recommend the former." Flint put his hat on. He adjusted it carefully. He looked at Clara. "This isn't over, Mrs. Whitfield." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." "Maybe. But today, right now in this church, you lost, and everyone in this room saw it." Something burned in Flint's eyes. Not anger, not hatred. Something worse. The cold, clear understanding of a man who'd been outmaneuvered by people he'd considered beneath him. He turned and walked out. Greer and the hired men followed. The door closed behind them, and the church exhaled. Jessie grabbed Clara's hand. "Is it over?" "Not yet," she said. "But it's close." Dalton spent the rest of the day taking statements. He set up in the back room of Ruth's restaurant, and people came in ones and twos, some openly, some looking over their shoulders. Dawson brought his tax records. Sarah brought her correspondence with the county assessor. Will Harper brought the names of 3 miners who'd witnessed the conditions in the tunnel where his brother died. Cross sat outside, watching the street. Flint's hired men were still at the hotel, but they stayed inside. Nobody came. Nobody left. By evening, Dalton had a stack of documents 6 inches thick. "This is enough to open a federal case," he told Clara. "But I need the Territorial Land Office to verify Robert Holden's claim. If his deed is authentic, Flint's entire mining grant collapses. Every contract, every claim, every deal he's made based on that grant becomes void. How long? I'll ride to Denver myself, a week, maybe less. And Jesse, the guardianship order is suspended. Crawford can't touch him. And your adoption petition is on record. As far as I'm concerned, that boy is yours, Mrs. Whitfield." Clara nodded. She didn't trust her voice. Dalton left the next morning. Graves stayed. Monday came and went. No sheriff, no court order, no Flint. The hotel was quiet. Greer and the hired men sat on the porch drinking, but they didn't ride out, didn't threaten, didn't move. "They're waiting," Graves said. "Flint's regrouping." "Let him regroup," Clara said. Tuesday something changed. Cross came to the ranch in the afternoon riding fast. "Flint's gone," he said. "What do you mean, gone?" "Checked out of the hotel this morning, took Greer and 2 of the Silver City men, left the others behind." "Where'd he go?" "North, toward Denver." Clara's blood went cold. "He's going after the land office records." "That's what I figure. If he gets there before Dalton's got a day's head start. Flint's got fresh horses and money." They stared at each other. Graves was already moving toward his horse. "I'll ride," Graves said. "You just got back." "And I'll go again. I know the shortcut through the canyon pass. I can cut a full day off the route. I'll catch Dalton and warn him." Clara grabbed his arm. "Samuel." He stopped. It was the first time she'd used his first name. "Be careful." Something passed between them, something neither of them named. He nodded once. "Take care of the boy." "Always." He rode out hard. Clara watched him go, the dust rising behind him. Wednesday passed. Thursday, Friday. No word, no riders, no letters. Jesse felt the tension. He stopped asking questions and started doing things instead. He fed the horses. He checked the water line. He swept the kitchen floor 3 times in one day. On Friday evening, Clara found him sitting on the porch, the tin box open in his lap, the photograph in his hands. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Papa?" He turned the photograph over. On the back in Robert's handwriting were 2 words Clara had never noticed before. She leaned closer. "Trust her." "He wrote that after Mama died," Jesse said. "I found it after the fire. He'd written it on the back and then gave me the picture. I didn't understand it then." "And now," Jesse looked up at her, "now I do. He wasn't just telling me to trust you. He was telling himself, reminding himself that if something happened, there was someone in the world who would do the right thing." Clara sat down beside him. "Jesse, there's something I never told you. About Matthew. About why your papa trusted me." "What?" "Matthew and your papa served together. You know that. But what you don't know is that after the war, your papa wrote to Matthew. A long letter. He said he'd met a woman, your mama, and he was going to marry her. And he asked Matthew one thing. He asked if Matthew knew anyone good enough to trust with a child's life. And Matthew wrote back and said yes." "You?" "Me. Your papa never met me, Jesse. But he trusted Matthew's word more than most people trust their own eyes. And Matthew, he believed in me more than I ever believed in myself." Jesse closed the tin box. "Mama." "Yeah. I think Papa and Mr. Whitfield are friends now, wherever they are." Clara's throat closed. She pulled Jesse close and held him against her side. "I think so too." Saturday morning a rider came. Clara grabbed the rifle and ran to the porch. Her heart was hammering. It was Graves. He was slumped in the saddle, exhausted, but he was smiling. Behind him, riding at an easy pace, was Marshal Dalton. And behind Dalton, in a wagon driven by a man in a dark suit, were 2 people Clara didn't recognize. Graves dismounted and nearly fell. Clara caught his arm. "Easy." "I'm fine." He wasn't fine. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. "Caught Dalton at the canyon. We rode together, reached Denver Thursday night." "And Flint?" "Flint got there Friday morning, too late." Graves grinned. Dalton had already filed the evidence with the federal land office. By the time Flint walked in, there were 3 federal agents waiting for him. Clara's knees went weak. They arrested him. Not yet, but they seized his records. Every document, every contract, every deed his company has filed in the last 10 years. And when they cross-referenced Robert Holden's claim with Flint's mining grant... Graves paused. "The grant was forged, Clara. Flint created it from whole cloth. The original land survey doesn't match. The signatures are fake. His entire operation is built on a lie." Dalton dismounted and walked toward the porch. "Mrs. Whitfield, I'd like you to meet someone." The man in the dark suit climbed down from the wagon and helped a woman step out. She was small, gray-haired, with sharp eyes behind wire spectacles. "Margaret Hale," the woman said, "Ruth's sister. And this is my husband Henry. He's an attorney." Henry Hale shook Clara's hand. "Mrs. Whitfield, we received the documents your friend Ruth sent. I've spent the last 3 days reviewing them with the Federal Land Office. Robert Holden's deed is authentic. His mining claim is valid. And as his legal heir, Jesse Holden is the rightful owner of that land and everything on it." Clara stared at him. "Everything?" "The gold vein Robert discovered is on Jesse's land. It's his, free and clear." Jesse had come out onto the porch. He stood behind Clara, one hand gripping the back of her shirt. "Did you hear that?" Clara said softly. "I heard. Your papa's land. Your papa's gold. It's yours, Jesse." Jesse was quiet for a long time. Then he said something Clara didn't expect. "I don't want gold. I just wanted Papa." Clara knelt down and held him. She held him while the weight of everything, the walking, the hiding, the fear, the loss, all of it pressed down on his small shoulders and then slowly began to lift. Dalton cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. Edgar Flint has been charged with fraud, coercion, and conspiracy. Federal warrants have been issued. His assets are frozen. His contracts are void. Every person in Copper Ridge who lost land, water, or livelihood because of his forged grant will be entitled to restitution." Clara looked up. Every person. Every single one. She thought of Dawson and his stolen creek, Sarah Jennings and her ruined ranch, Will Harper and his dead brother, Cross and the brother he'd lost to drink and despair. "They need to know," Clara said. "I'll tell them myself," Dalton said. "Tomorrow, in the church. Seems like that's where this town does its best work." Ruth arrived an hour later. She'd heard the news from Cross, who'd ridden to town the moment he saw Dalton's wagon. Ruth walked into the kitchen, saw her sister Margaret standing there, and stopped dead. "Maggie." "Hello, Ruth." They stood there for a moment, two old women who hadn't seen each other in years, and then Ruth crossed the room and grabbed her sister so hard they both nearly fell over. "You came?" Ruth said, her voice breaking. "You asked. Of course I came." Jesse watched them from the doorway. He turned to Clara. "Is that what family looks like?" he asked. Clara put her arm around him. "That's exactly what family looks like." That night, the house was full. Ruth and Margaret in the kitchen, cooking enough food for a regiment. Henry Hale at the table organizing documents. Cross and Dawson on the porch keeping watch out of habit. Graves in the barn, finally sleeping. Clara stood in the doorway of Jesse's room. He was in bed, the tin box on the nightstand, the wooden horse Matthew had carved in his hand. "Big day tomorrow," Clara said. "Yeah. You ready?" "I think so." He paused. "Clara." "Yeah. When this is all done, when it's over, are we going to stay here at the ranch?" "Where else would we go?" "I don't know. I just wanted to make sure." Clara crossed the room and sat on the edge of his bed. "This is your home, Jesse. For as long as you want it. For as long as I'm breathing. And after that, you'll have a ranch, a cottonwood tree, and a whole town full of people who fought for you. That's more than most folks get." Jesse held up the wooden horse. "Can I keep this?" "It was always meant for you." Clara's voice caught. "I just didn't know it yet." Jesse set the horse on the pillow beside him and closed his eyes. Clara watched him for a moment. This boy who'd walked out of the wilderness carrying everything his father had left him. This boy who'd given her back something she thought was gone forever. She pulled the blanket up to his chin, touched his hair, and walked out. In the kitchen, Ruth was washing dishes. She looked up when Clara came in. "He asleep?" "Almost." Ruth dried her hands. "Clara, I want you to know something. What you did, what you've done these past 2 weeks, taking in that boy, standing up to Flint, pulling this whole town together, it's the bravest thing I've ever seen." "I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified." "That's what brave is. Terrified and doing it anyway." Ruth paused. Matthew would be so proud of you. Clara leaned against the counter. You think so? I know so. That man loved you more than anything on this earth. And if he could see you now standing there, mother to a boy who needed one, he'd say what he always said. What's that? That's my girl. Clara closed her eyes. She could almost hear it. Matthew's voice, low and warm the way he'd say it when she did something that surprised him, which was often. That's my girl. She opened her eyes. Ruth was watching her with a look that was equal parts love and steel. Now go get some sleep, Ruth said. Tomorrow we finish this. Clara nodded. She walked past the table where Henry Hale's documents were stacked neat and solid. She walked past the tin box still sitting where Jessie had left it. She walked to her room and sat on the edge of her bed. She pulled off her boots, took off her coat, laid the pistol on the nightstand. Then she did something she hadn't done in 2 years. She folded her hands, bowed her head, and prayed. Not for herself, not for victory, not for justice. She prayed for a man named Robert Holden, who'd loved his son enough to send him walking into the unknown. She prayed for Matthew Whitfield, who'd believed in her when she didn't believe in anything. She prayed for Jesse, sleeping in the next room with a wooden horse on his pillow and a future he was only just beginning to understand. And when she was done, she whispered 2 words into the dark. Thank you. She didn't know who she was talking to. God, maybe. Matthew. Robert. The universe. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she meant it. She lay down, pulled the blanket up, and closed her eyes. For the first time in 2 years, sleep came easy. Sunday morning, Clara woke to the sound of voices. Not loud, not urgent, just the steady hum of people gathering. She pulled on her boots, strapped the knife to her belt out of habit, and walked to the kitchen. Ruth and Margaret were already cooking. Henry Hale was at the table, his documents organized into 3 neat stacks. Graves was standing by the door, coffee in hand, looking more rested than she'd seen him in weeks. How long have you been up? Clara asked him. Hour or so. Cross is already in town. Says the church is filling up fast. How fast? Graves looked at her. Standing room only. Clara poured herself coffee. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. After everything, after 2 weeks of fear and fury and sleepless nights, her hands were steady. Jesse came out of the back room. He was dressed, hair combed, the tin box tucked under his arm. You don't need to bring that, Clara said. I want to. He held it tighter. Papa should be there too. Clara didn't argue. They loaded into the wagon, all of them. Ruth and Margaret on the bench seat. Henry Hale in the back with his documents. Graves on horseback alongside. Jesse sat next to Clara, the tin box on his lap. As they rode toward town, Clara saw them. People on the road. Families in wagons, men on horseback, women walking in their Sunday dresses, all heading the same direction. Where are they all coming from? Jesse asked. Everywhere, Ruth said. Word travels fast when people finally have something worth hearing. They reached the church, and Clara pulled up short. Cross hadn't exaggerated. The building was packed. People were standing outside, crowding the windows, sitting on fence posts and wagon beds. Clara saw faces she recognized and faces she didn't. Ranchers from the far side of the valley, miners from Copper Creek, shopkeepers, farmers, people who'd driven half a day to be here. Dawson met them at the door. You're not going to believe this. Try me. Judge Crawford's inside. Clara's stomach dropped. Crawford? Why? Don't know. Showed up 20 minutes ago. Walked in, sat down in the back row, hasn't said a word. Clara looked at Graves. He shrugged. Could be trouble. Could be something else. Only one way to find out. They went inside. The church was so full, people were standing along the walls, packed shoulder to shoulder. Clara walked up the center aisle with Jessie beside her. She felt every pair of eyes in the room. She didn't look at Crawford. Not yet. Reverend Keller was at the pulpit. He waited until Clara sat down, then raised his hand for silence. It took a while. I've been the reverend of this church for 18 years, Keller said. In that time I've married your children, buried your parents, and sat with you through every kind of joy and sorrow this life offers. I've never used this pulpit for anything other than God's word." He paused. "Today, I'm going to make an exception, because sometimes God's word isn't just in the Bible. Sometimes it's in the truth that people are finally brave enough to speak." He stepped aside. Marshal Dalton took his place. "My name is Thomas Dalton. I'm a federal marshal assigned to the Colorado Territory. I'm here because 2 weeks ago, a woman named Clara Whitfield took in a boy named Jesse Holden, a boy whose father was murdered by a man named Edgar Flint, a boy who carried the proof of that murder in a tin box across 5 days of open country because his dying father told him to." Dalton looked at Jesse. Jesse looked back straight and steady. "I've spent the past week investigating Edgar Flint and the Flint Mining Company. What I've found is this." He held up a document. Flint's mining grant, the document he's used for 10 years to claim ownership of land across this territory, is a forgery. The signatures are fake. The land survey doesn't match federal records. Every contract, every claim, every deal Flint has made based on this grant is null and void. The church erupted. People were on their feet talking, shouting. Dawson grabbed Buckley's arm. Sarah Jennings put her hand over her mouth. Will Harper just closed his eyes and breathed. Dalton raised his hand. "There's more. Federal agents arrested Edgar Flint yesterday morning in Denver. He's been charged with fraud, forgery, coercion, and conspiracy to commit murder. His assets have been seized. His men have been ordered to vacate the territory." More shouting. More noise. Ruth was gripping Clara's arm so hard it hurt. "Every person in this room who has been harmed by Flint's fraudulent claims will be entitled to full restitution. Your land, your water rights, your livelihoods will be restored." Dawson was crying. Tom Dawson, who'd spent 2 years whittling sticks on his porch because he'd given up, was standing in a church pew with tears running down his weathered face. Sarah Jennings found Clara's eyes across the room and nodded once. That was all. One nod, but it carried the weight of 5 years of stolen taxes and sleepless nights. Dalton continued. "I also want to address the matter of Jesse Holden. The guardianship order filed by Edgar Flint has been permanently vacated. Judge Crawford's involvement in this matter is under federal review, and the adoption petition filed by Clara Whitfield has been forwarded to the territorial office with my full endorsement." Clara's breath caught. She looked at Jesse. He was staring at Dalton, his mouth slightly open, the tin box clutched to his chest. "As far as the federal government is concerned," Dalton said, "Jesse Holden has a mother, and she's sitting right there." Every head in the church turned to Clara. She felt it. The weight of their eyes, their gratitude, their respect. She didn't know what to do with it. Jesse leaned into her side. She put her arm around him. Keller stepped back to the pulpit. "Before we close, is there anyone else who'd like to speak?" A chair scraped in the back row. Everyone turned. Judge Crawford stood up. The room went cold. Clara felt Graves tense beside her. Cross by the back door moved his hand to his belt. Crawford was a small man, thin, with a pinched face and watery eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hands were shaking. "I know what you all think of me," Crawford said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "And you're right. I took Flint's money. I signed his orders. I looked the other way when people in this town were being robbed and cheated and worse." Dead silence. Nobody moved. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know something." His voice cracked. 3 years ago, Flint came to my office with a man. The man put a gun on my desk and told me that if I didn't cooperate, they'd hurt my daughter, my Sarah. She was 14. A murmur rippled through the church. "I'm not saying that makes it right. Nothing makes it right. But I want you to know I didn't start this. I was afraid. I was a coward. And people suffered because of it." He looked at Clara. Mrs. Whitfield, I owe you an apology. I owe this whole town an apology. I know words don't fix what I've done, but I'm willing to testify against Flint. Everything I know, every deal, every threat, every dollar, I'll give it all to the marshal." He sat down. The church was silent for a long time. Then Ruth McAllister stood up. She turned to face Crawford. Everyone held their breath. "Edward Crawford," Ruth said, "you're a damn fool." Crawford flinched. "But you're a damn fool who just stood up in front of God and this whole town and told the truth. That counts for something." She paused. "Not much, but something." A laugh broke out somewhere in the middle pews. Then another. The tension cracked like ice on a spring river, and suddenly people were talking, nodding, some even smiling. Keller raised his hands. All right, settle down. I believe this calls for a prayer." "It calls for a drink," someone yelled from the back. "That too," Keller said. "But the prayer comes first." He prayed. It wasn't a long prayer, but it was a good one. He prayed for the families who'd suffered. He prayed for Robert Holden's soul. He prayed for Jesse and Clara and the road ahead. And he prayed for Copper Ridge, that it would remember this day, not as the day they beat one man, but as the day they decided to stand together. "Amen," the church said. "Amen," Jesse whispered. They spilled out of the church and into the bright summer sun. People were everywhere talking, embracing, shaking hands. Dawson found Clara and grabbed her hand with both of his. "My creek," he said. "I'm getting my creek back." "You are." "Clara, I don't know how to thank you." "You stood up when I asked. That's thanks enough." Will Harper came next. He was quieter, more contained, but his eyes were red. "My brother," he said. "They're going to investigate his death. Dalton told me." Clara put her hand on his arm. "Your brother deserved better." "He did. And now maybe he'll get it." Sarah Jennings walked up Dixon at her side. Sarah didn't say anything. She just hugged Clara quick and fierce, then stepped back and smoothed her dress like it had never happened. "Well," Sarah said, "that was quite a Sunday." Clara almost laughed. "It was." Cross appeared at her elbow. "There's something you should see." He led her around the side of the church. Flint's hired men, the ones who'd stayed behind at the hotel, were riding out of town. 5 of them heading south, moving fast. No Greer, no Flint. Just hired guns with nothing left to be hired for. "They're leaving," Clara said. Flint stopped paying. No money, no loyalty. Clara watched them ride until they were gone. It was over. She knew it in her bones. The machine Flint had built, the web of threats and bribes and forged papers, it was collapsing. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. Men on horses riding away from a fight that wasn't worth fighting anymore. She walked back to the front of the church. Jesse was sitting on the steps, the tin box open, the photograph in his hands. Graves was beside him, not talking, just sitting. Clara stopped. She watched them for a moment. The tall, weathered man and the small, sunburned boy sitting side by side on the church steps, quiet and easy in each other's company. Graves looked up and saw her watching. Something passed across his face. He stood, touched Jesse's shoulder, and walked to meet her. "You all right?" he asked. "I think so. I'm tired, but it's the good kind of tired." Clara nodded. "Samuel, I want to thank you for everything. The ride to Pueblo, the ride to Denver, sleeping in my barn. You didn't have to do any of it." "I owed Matthew. You paid that debt 10 times over." "Maybe." He paused. "Or maybe I wasn't just paying a debt. Maybe I was building something new." Clara looked at him. "What do you mean?" Graves took off his hat, turned it in his hands. For a man who'd spent years chasing outlaws and sleeping on the ground, he looked suddenly completely uncertain. "I mean, I'd like to stay in Copper Ridge, near the ranch, if that's all right with you." Clara felt the heat rise in her face. She hadn't blushed in years. "That's a big decision." "It is." You sure you want to make it standing outside a church? The corner of his mouth turned up. Seems like the right place for it. Clara looked at him for a long moment. She thought about Matthew, about the 2 years of silence and solitude, about the walls she'd built to keep the world out, and the boy who'd walked right through them. There's a piece of land east of my fence line, she said. Good soil, good water. No one's claimed it. Is that so? It is. Might be a good place for a man to build something. Graves put his hat back on. Might be. I'm not promising anything. I'm not asking for anything. Good. Good. They stood there, two stubborn people in the summer sun, not promising and not asking and understanding each other perfectly. Jesse walked up between them, the tin box under his arm. He looked at Clara, then at Graves, then back at Clara. Are you two going to stand here all day, or can we go home? I'm hungry. Ruth appeared behind him. The boy's got sense. Come on. I've got enough food at the restaurant to feed this whole town, and I intend to. They walked together down the main street of Copper Ridge. Clara and Jesse and Graves and Ruth. Behind them, Dawson and Buckley and Harper and Sarah and Cross and Dixon and a dozen others. People came out of shops and houses to join them. By the time they reached Ruth's restaurant, there were 50 people, maybe more, all following an old woman with a rolling pin, and a widow with a tin box, and a boy who'd walked 5 days to find a home. Ruth cooked for 3 hours straight. Margaret helped. Sarah Jennings helped. Even Dawson's wife, who Clara had never met, showed up with 2 pies and a story about how she'd once chased a rattlesnake off her porch with a frying pan. Jesse sat at the big table in the center, surrounded by people who'd fought for him. He ate 2 plates of biscuits and gravy, 3 slices of pie, and drank enough lemonade to float a horse. He laughed when Buckley told a joke about a mule. He listened when Harper talked about his brother. He held Ruth's hand when she got quiet and stared at nothing, thinking about her own boy. Clara watched him from across the room. This child who'd arrived at her door, half dead and desperate. This child who'd called her mama. Graves appeared beside her with a plate of food. You should eat. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten since yesterday. I'll eat later. Clara. She looked at him. He held out the plate. She took it. Thank you. You're welcome. They ate standing up side by side, watching the room. It felt natural, like something they'd been doing for years instead of days. Samuel. Yeah. Matthew would have liked you. Graves went quiet. Then he said, That's the best thing anyone's ever said to me. That evening, when the food was gone and the town had said its thank yous and its goodbyes, Clara loaded Jesse into the wagon and drove home. Graves rode alongside as always. The sun was low, turning everything gold. They reached the ranch and Clara pulled up by the barn. Jesse climbed down and stood in the yard looking at the house. His house. Their house. Clara. Yeah. Can I show you something? He walked around the back of the house, past the barn, past the chicken coop, to the cottonwood tree. Matthew's tree. Jesse stood in front of the grave marker, the tin box in his hands. I want to put something here, he said, if that's okay. Clara walked up beside him. What do you want to put? Jesse opened the tin box. He took out the photograph of his parents, Robert and Margaret Holden, young and alive and holding a baby who didn't know yet how hard the world could be. He knelt down and placed the photograph against the base of the headstone. Leaned it there, careful the way you'd lean a picture on a mantel. Papa should be near someone who cared about him, Jesse said. And Mr. Whitfield cared about him. So this feels right. Clara knelt beside him. She read Matthew's headstone. Matthew Whitfield, beloved husband, 1840 to 1876. It does feel right, she said. Jesse looked at the photograph. Do you think they're together, Papa and Mr. Whitfield? I think, Clara said slowly, that wherever they are, they're looking down at us right now. And I think your papa is saying he made the right choice. And I think Matthew is saying the same thing. What thing? That's my girl. Jesse smiled. It was a real smile, full and warm, the kind of smile that meant he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. They walked back to the house together. Graves was unsaddling his horse by the barn. He looked up as they passed. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Everything's all right," Clara said. Inside, she lit the lamp and put water on for tea. Jesse sat at the table and opened the tin box one more time. He took out Robert's letter, the one that started everything, and read it again. "Clara." "Yeah." "The letter says don't let him take my son. But Mr. Flint's gone now. Nobody's trying to take me." "That's right. So what do we do with the letter?" Clara sat down across from him. "What do you want to do with it?" Jesse thought about it. "I want to keep it, but not in the box. I want to put it somewhere I can see it every day, so I remember." "Remember what?" "That my papa loved me enough to save me, and that you loved me enough to fight for me." Clara reached across the table and took his hand. "We'll frame it. Hang it right there by the door, so every time we walk in we see it." "I'd like that." "Then that's what we'll do." Jesse closed the tin box for the last time. He pushed it to the center of the table. "Good night, Mama." "Good night, Jesse." He walked to his room and closed the door. Clara sat at the table, her hand resting on the tin box. She thought about everything that had happened. A boy at her gate. A letter in a box. A dead man's wish. A town that remembered what it meant to stand up. A woman who'd stopped talking to God and then found a reason to start again. She washed the cups, checked the doors, and blew out the lamp. She walked to Jesse's room and opened the door. He was asleep, the wooden horse on the pillow beside him. She pulled the blanket up and kissed his forehead. Then she walked to the front door and opened it. Graves was sitting in the barn doorway the way he always did, rifle across his knees. "You should sleep inside," she called out. "There's a spare cot in the storage room." "You sure?" "The barn's for horses, Samuel, not for people who just rode 6 days to save my family." Graves stood. He walked across the yard and up the porch steps. He stopped in the doorway, close enough that Clara could see the lines around his eyes, the dust still in his hair, the quiet, steady look that said more than words ever could. "Thank you, Clara." "For what?" "For letting me be part of this." She stepped aside to let him in. "You were part of this from the moment you walked into Ruth's restaurant." He passed her in the doorway. Their shoulders touched. Neither of them moved away. "Good night, Clara." "Good night, Samuel." She closed the door. The house was full. Jesse in his room. Graves in the storage room. The tin box on the table. Matthew's wooden horse on a pillow. A letter that would be framed by morning. Clara Whitfield stood in her kitchen in the dark, in a house that had been empty for 2 years, and was now so full it could barely hold everything inside it. She pressed her hand flat against the wall. Solid. Real. She'd lost 2 babies. She'd buried a husband. She'd stopped believing in anything except the work of her own hands. And then a boy walked 5 days through the wilderness to find her carrying a dead man's letter and a tin box full of proof that the world still had good in it. She went to bed. She slept deep and long and dreamless. In the morning, Jesse was up first. She found him in the kitchen frying eggs. Graves was at the table drinking coffee, looking like a man who'd just discovered what a roof felt like. "Morning," Jesse said. "Morning. I made breakfast." "I see that." "Mr. Graves says I make good coffee." Graves nodded. "He does." Clara sat down. Jesse put a plate in front of her. Eggs, biscuits, a cup of coffee. She looked at the food, then at the boy who'd made it, then at the man sitting across from her. "Well," she said, "this is new." "Good new?" Jesse asked. Clara picked up her fork. She looked at the tin box sitting on the table, the letter inside it, the deed, the claim, the photograph now resting under a cottonwood tree, where 2 men who'd saved each other's lives could be together. She looked at Jesse, her son. She looked at Graves, whatever he was becoming. She looked at the chair across from her that hadn't been empty in 2 weeks, and never would be again. "Yeah," Clara said. "Good new." They ate breakfast together. The summer sun came through the window warm and strong. Outside, the horses moved in the pasture. The land stretched wide and open and free. Somewhere in Denver, Edgar Flint sat in a cell stripped of everything he'd stolen. Somewhere in Copper Ridge, Tom Dawson was riding out to check his creek for the first time in 2 years. Somewhere in a small restaurant, Ruth McAllister was telling her sister about a boy with a tin box who'd changed everything. And in a ranch house under a cottonwood tree, a woman who'd lost everything sat at a table with a son she'd never expected, and a future she'd never imagined, eating eggs and drinking coffee, and understanding finally completely what it meant to be home. Clara Whitfield had stopped talking to God 2 years ago. But God, it turned out, hadn't stopped talking to her. He'd just sent the message in a tin box, carried by a barefoot boy, across 5 days of open country, written in a dead man's hand, sealed with blood, and delivered to the only door in the world where it belonged. And Clara had opened it.